democratic is truth. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. We live in an age when people assume that knowledge should be available equally to all. In matters susceptible of judgment by normal common sense, however, everyone knows there are exceptions. Access to a control room for intercontinental missiles is limited by universal consent to a very few. Access to the controls of a passenger airliner is limited to those with the necessary knowledge for operating them, and also to those with the proper authorization. If people don't see the disadvantages of making more subtle knowledge universally available, it is only because they are ignorant of the risks involved. In the case of subtle knowledge, the main disadvantage in making it universally available is the harm it might do to the person himself. True, by mocking truth, he might undermine the faith of a few truth seekers. But then, such tests can also be beneficial as a means of strengthening faith. Again, true, the clever doubters' misrepresentation of those truths may dissuade a few seekers from following the spiritual path. But if a seeker really is sincere, he will recognize the truth eventually because it resonates with his own being. No, the greatest problem accrues to the shallow doubter himself. To give him an opportunity to affirm his ignorance might only estrange him even more from the truth, delaying the time when he will turn, as all people must eventually, to the light. Thus, the scriptures advise not secrecy, but discretion in the sharing of truth. Jesus Christ says in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, "Give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast you your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you." And Sri Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, "Never speak of these truths to one who is without self-control or devotion, who renders no service, who does not care to hear, or who speaks ill of me." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So the reading was speaking about not sharing these truths with those who don't want to listen to them. And now we had a problem with our microphone. Fun. So again, I wish you a beautiful Sunday. I wanted to start, before speaking about this interesting topic, with a reading from Whispers from Eternity by Yogananda. A book where Yogananda collected wonderful prayers and perfect attitudes for the devotee and taught us how to respond to life. This is number 41. Wake me, that I may know that the terrors of mundane delusions are only dreams. Wrapped in the blanket of hope, I slept long. I dreamed I was sitting on a throne, my face wreathed in smiles. My smiles withered, and the petals of my merriment dropped away one by one. Suddenly, I beheld myself in rags. Seated on the hard stones of poverty, I wept, and my teardrops fell on the unheeding, unrelenting stones of my present circumstances. The world passed me by in mocking silence. I cried out for thy help, and thou didst wake me at last through the force of my desperation. I laughed to find myself at last neither rich nor poor, but safe forever in thy arms. O waken all anxious souls from their dreams of smiling opulence and crying poverty. O maker of dream worlds, deliver me forever from the nightmares of disease and death. Wake me to immortality. Wake me to unshaken calmness, that I may know the fierce terrors of mundane delusions to be only dreams. Wake me to immortality. Wake me to unshaken calmness, that I may know the fierce terrors of mundane delusion to be only dreams. So this topic of today, of how democratic is truth, is very interesting. Especially looking at today's society, for me it's incredible to see how much Swami Kriyananda was able to touch the very essence, the very center of every topic. Also, when he spoke about intercontinental missiles, I almost laughed because I was thinking he wrote this maybe 20, 30 years ago, but he had such a perception, such a deep perception of how we should deal with the truth when we share with others, and also when we have to, and also dealing with ourselves. And I would like to go deeper in this part. The reading clarifies a lot about the degrees of spiritual maturity to be able to receive spiritual teachings. But I would like to turn it a little toward ourselves and see, because each of us has his or her own basic, let's say, consciousness, and then we go up and down according to what we are facing in our lives in that moment, in each moment. So I would like to look at where we should keep our gaze. Because truth has many levels. It's interesting, a woman saint, Indian woman saint, I think you heard of her, Ananda Moima. Yogananda writes about her in his autobiography of a yogi. Since she was a child, she had ecstasies. She was in perfect communion with God. But on the practical level, she never had any instruction, education. She couldn't read or write. Nowadays, we think it's common, normal, that everybody can read and write. This is a false idea. It's not true that everybody needs to have access to all information. We have this false idea that people are able to deal with the information we receive. If we look with common sense around us, we see it's not true. Ananda Moima, even though she was not educated, when she needed to know something, maybe someone asked her to perform a ceremony with a 20 minutes mantra. Without ever reading or hearing that mantra, she was able to perform it, to do it. Because she was completely in touch with the source of truth. It's interesting, once someone asked her a question, and looking at this person, she said, depending on your state of consciousness, you can give 6 different answers to these questions, to this question. And she gave these 6 different answers. In these last years, we saw many information of any kind. We saw people convinced that all this information, different information, are the truth, is the truth. I would like to see this today. For us as devotees, we have to be sure that we are touching the highest reality. It doesn't matter what truth we meet on the lower level of reality. Let's not stop there. Let's always go to the upper, so the highest reality. Because the other reality on the lower level is not always reliable. Maybe for years we are convinced of something, and then we experiment something else, and we understand it was different. And it was not true at all what we believed. It was truth. So a thing that from this very moment you think is true, a minute later is false. There is a story about a countryman in India. I don't know if it is a true story. It's a story about a countryman who was next to a tree. His wife arrives and says, "Our only son was bitten by a cobra and is dead." He was completely absorbed in his thoughts. And the wife said, "Don't you have a heart? Didn't you listen what I said? Didn't you hear what I said?" If you have children, you can imagine that it's not easy to face something like that. And he answered, "You don't understand what is happening. Last night, I slept last night. I dreamed I was a king. And I had 7 children. And all 7 children went to a forest. They were bitten by a cobra and they died. And now I am wondering, should I cry for those 7 children who died in that dream, or for this single child who died in this dream?" And Yogananda ends the story saying, this man was a great soul who understood, perceived that the only truth is consciousness, divine light. And this earthly life is a dream as much as a dream he had in the night before. Yogananda often used this metaphor, saying that all this reality is a dream. It is only a dream of the divine consciousness. Lahiri Mahashaya said that this immutable spirit took 1% of his or its consciousness and moved it. And this 1%, this tiny, tiny part, became this cosmos, this universe. Yogananda also said that the goal of this dream, sometimes fun, sometimes a nightmare, is to entertain us and to educate us, to help us grow. And this happens only if you remember it is a dream. As soon as you are trapped by this delusion, it's not fun, and you won't learn much. I wanted to read a part of a story from Autobiography of a Yogi. Yogananda said that in 1915 he was meditating in his room in Kolkata, And all of a sudden, he found himself in the body of a captain on a military ship in the middle of the First World War. The ship exploded. He found himself in the ocean. He tried to swim to the beach. He was able to reach the beach, and all of a sudden he was hit by a bullet. He fell and he was dying on the beach, on the sand, and he was thinking, okay, now death came to me. In that moment, he was thinking that he found himself again in his body in Kolkata, and he said he was so full of joy of being in a body that didn't have a hole. He was crying and laughing, and he was touching himself to realize he was in the body, back in the body. In the middle of it, he found himself again in the body of that soldier, that captain. And he says this.
Ero in preda alla più totale confusione mentale. Signore, pregai.
Lord, I prayed. Utter confusion of mind came upon me. Lord, I prayed, am I dead or alive? A dazzling play of light filled the whole horizon. A soft rumbling vibration formed itself into words. What has life or death to do with light? In the image of my light, I have made you. The relativities of life and death belong to the cosmic dream. Behold, your dreamless being. Awake, my child, awake. Then he shared that a few days later he was watching a movie with news about the Second World War. And again, seeing all that suffering, he prayed, Lord, why do you allow similar suffering? With my surprise, I received an instantaneous answer. It was a vision about the true battlefields in Europe. The horror was great. It was full of dead people. It was a vision of violence. A beautiful voice spoke to my inner consciousness. Look, you will see that these scenes that are happening now in France are only a dream of light and darkness. They are the cosmic dream, the cosmic movie that is real and unreal as much as the movie you were watching a moment ago. It is just a representation, a play in the play. My heart, anyway, was not totally released with it. Creation is light and darkness. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to have any image, picture. In Maya, bad and evil have to alternate continuously. If joy would be constant in this life, a human being would never look for truth. Without suffering, humankind would never look for truth. So, suffering is made to help you find wisdom. The tragedy of death is not real. Those who are afraid before it are just like an ignorant actor dying on the scene. My children are the children of light. They won't remain eternally in the dream of delusion. So the vision of the masters is completely different from the one we have. But there we have to look at with our concentration, we have to try to remember that even when we are trapped, everything is light. Remember that. It's interesting that Swami Kriyananda said once that to find freedom in God, we have to leave all kind of experiences. Once he even said, if you have any experience that is not interesting for you anymore, it means that you already experimented it so many times that it's not interesting for you anymore, any kind of experience. What we should try to do. So this truth seems so far away, but let's try to bring it in our daily life, in many small ways. Let's find small ways to touch that divine presence, so as we are not lost completely in delusion. I remember once I went to a dentist. Not only once, I went many times, but one time I had to some work done on a tooth, and it was not a very fun experience. And I remember that I heard the story of Swami Kriyananda, who went to the dentist, and when he did this kind of work, I saw someone touching already his jaw. When Swami went to the dentist, he did that without anesthesia. So I didn't do like Swami, but I tried to do my best. I tried to be concentrated deeply at the point between the eyebrows. I was doing japa. I took actually two anesthesias. And after that, I wasn't able to feel anything, of course. After the surgery, I came out from the dentist. Mahia had to pick me up by car. And thanks God she was late, because the anesthesia starting to become less. And the tooth I needed surgery on was very much back in my mouth. I saw the dentist working almost in my throat. So anyway, it was pretty intense. So the pain started to... I started to have such a strong headache that I wasn't able to think. The whole head was aching. All my energy was sucked by this pain. I was looking around, but I wasn't even able to relate with the external world. There was a park across the road, so I went there. I sat and I said, okay, Arudra, you are on this path for more than 10 years. You learned many techniques, tools. Use one of them. Do something. So I concentrated again at the spiritual eye and I asked, what can I do? And I had two ideas. The first was to do Hong Saw at that point. I don't know if you did that. Swami Kriyananda said, when you have a strong pain, physical, mental, try to practice Hong Saw in that point and feel that when you exhale, you relax and there is no longer that attachment that makes you suffer. But it didn't work. That time it was probably too strong, I don't know. It didn't work. So it works for many pains, but that time it didn't work. I don't know why. So I stopped and I asked again, what can I do?
Mi è venuta un'idea che
And I had an idea
intuitiva
that was pretty weird, that was to use the principle of recharging, that was to bite
stringere i denti fortemente,
strongly,
mandare luce.
send light, and then relax. So I said, okay, let's try. So I concentrated even more at the point between the eyebrows. I tried to visualize light. I tensed strongly, I sent light, and then I relaxed completely. And I felt that this light was expanding. And within 60 seconds, the pain was completely gone.
Ed era scambiato da un senso di
And I had an incredible, intense joy within me. And I had that thought, I should do this thing more often, going to the dentist and then experiment this. But I didn't do that.
e poi ho cominciato a camminare
And then I started walking, and for half an hour I went on tensing, sending light, letting go, relaxing, feeling the light. At the end, I was in a completely different state of consciousness. I was completely in touch with that light. I felt that that pain
che ha una data di scadenza in qualche senso.
had that
La parte reale era la luce.
that part was not real. The real part was the light.
In questo periodo
And I think that in this period when there are so many transformations inward and outwards, we have to try to grasp that light with all the tools we have. When we see suffering, try to see light behind it, because when you see that, you can find a solution, find help, and you will be able to uplift that situation.
perché abbiamo la scelta dove
Because we have a choice where we want to concentrate. I remember Swami Kirananda combined the affirmation of concentration with the reading of today, not by chance.
perché lui stesso
Because he himself wrote in the book Raja Yoga,
assorbe
the mind absorbs the qualities of whatever you concentrate on. The mind absorbs the qualities of whatever you are concentrating on.
se noi guardiamo il mondo e
If we look at the world and we stop on the worldly level with a lot of corruption, suffering, ignorance, you will absorb that.
se vediamo la stessa
If you see the same thing, but you try to
nostro sguardo se
perceive, to see with your gaze the divine light behind that, what you absorb will be that, the divine light. And also what you can offer to the world will be that divine light. So we won't put more wood on fire, on the fire of suffering, but you will share light.
per concludere
To end,
una cosa interessante per me, una storia interessante.
I would like to share an interesting story that always fascinated me.
Non mi ricordo, credo che sia nell'autobiografia di uno yogi
I think
dove
in Autobiography of a Yogi, there is a story where Sri Yukteswar visits for the last time his master Lahiri Mahashaya. He enters the house. Lahiri looks at him and says, "Didn't you see Babaji at the door?" "No, I didn't see him," Sri Yukteswar said. And Lahiri goes to Sri Yukteswar, touches him at the forehead, and all of a sudden, Sri Yukteswar is able to see Babaji next to the entrance door. At the end of their conversation, Babaji says, "My son, you have to meditate more, because you didn't see me, hidden behind the rays of the sun." It is the same for us. The divine light is always present.
i maestri sono sempre presenti.
The masters are always present. But if you don't go deeply, you won't see them. hidden behind the light of the sun, that is, behind gross matter.
Vorrei concludere
I would like to end with a practice.
allora vi lascio con una frase perché è venuta una frase poi
I want to share a sentence from autobiography and then a practice. Yogananda said that his favorite sentence of autobiography of a yogi is a sentence from Sri Yukteswar, his guru. It says,
le vite passate
past lives of all men are
tante vergogne
full of many shames.
tutto in futuro
Everything in the future will get better if you make the spiritual effort now. Everything in the future will improve if you make the effort, spiritual effort now. He didn't say one thing or two things will improve. Everything will improve. So we want to end with a spiritual effort. Again, sit with our spine straight.
prima di fare la pratica
And before this practice,
prova a pensare a una situazione nella tua vita
try to think of a moment in your life, a situation in your life which is a challenge. Maybe a big challenge in your personal life, or also a worldwide challenge, something big.
guardare questa cosa
And then look at this challenge, small or big, from a different perspective. Touching this light. Inhale twice, tense the body gradually, vibrate, hold the tension with every cell full of light, then exhale and relax again. Tense gradually, the light penetrates every cell, exhale and relax. And twice more. Vibrate, exhale and relax. And one last time. Transform your cells into light and relax.
e poi concentrandoti nel punto
Now, concentrate at the point between the eyebrows and mentally try to repeat this prayer
proprio con concentrazione
with total concentration. Try to perceive, visualize, feel these words.
o spirito
O Spirit,
amato Padre
beloved Father,
anima suprema
oversoul of the universe,
spirito degli spiriti
Spirit of spirits,
amico degli
friend of friends,
svelami il
teach me the
mistero
mystery of my existence.
insegnami a
Teach me to
venerare
worship Thee
al di là
in
del
breathlessness
della morte
and in deathlessness.
nel fuoco della devozione
In the fire of
brucia la
devotion,
mia ignoranza
burn away my
nella
ignorance.
silenzia calma della mia
In the stillness of my soul, come, Spirit, come,
possiedi
possess me and teach me to feel
la tua
Thy immortal presence in
dentro di
and around me.
e tutti intorno a me vieni
Come, Spirit, come,
vieni
come, Spirit, come.
rimanendo con la tua
In this,
nello che
with this concentration at the spiritual eye,
prova a visualizzare
try to visualize, perceive
questa presenza immortale,
this immortal presence,
una supercoscienza
super consciousness,
divina.
the divine consciousness.
E prova a rendere
And try
punto di percezione
to make this
molto intenso,
point of perception very intense, with an intense light and intense calmness.
e poi lasciala espandere
And then let it expand in all directions, just like a sphere,
una sfera di luce,
a sphere of light,
di pace,
of peace,
di immortalità.
of immortality.
E poi da quella presenza
And from that presence, try to look at the same situation, challenging situation you chose before. Look at it from this upper point and try to see the bigger picture. Om Shanti.